Okay, hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. I'm here with Derrel Sims, and he goes by the moniker Alien Hunter. So he's a veteran researcher of anomalous scientific studies. He will discuss his quest to unveil the hidden agendas behind alien abductions and alien implants. This includes new work on the DNA of abductees who claim their parents were unwitting surrogates for their alien abductors. And that paragraph is on my website, and I'm just going to jump to his background here. He is a researcher, counselor, international speaker, private investigator, and reality TV star. Derrel Sims, the alien hunter, is the world's leading expert on alien abductions. His 38 plus years of field research has focused on physical evidence and led to his groundbreaking discoveries of alien implants and alien fluorescence. As a former military police officer and CIA operative, Sims has a unique insight into the alien organization, which he believes functions similarly to an intelligence agency. Sims is also a compassionate and skilled therapist who has helped hundreds of alien experiencers from all over the world come to terms with what they've witnessed. And he has quite a long bio. It's all on my website. And I just want to welcome Derrel Sims. It's great to have you on the show, Derrel. It's actually wonderful and an honor, because I have to tell you that I do refer people to you all the time.
Well, thank you, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and hopefully we'll get to some of the technical details straightened out. But I'm delighted to be here tonight, and hope that I can bring something new and a little different to your program tonight for alien abduction and contact.
Excellent. And so at this moment, can you kind of augment this this discussion that we've just had? In other words, the overview that I gave. You have a huge bio here, actually. And for the people that don't know who you are, it'd be great for them to see more or hear more.
Sure. First of all, you might refer to me as a captive audience in the alien abduction business, simply because at age 4, that's when I had my first experience. So I'm not just a person who's read about this and so on. I've actually experienced it firsthand. And many of my events were conscious. There were approximately 10 of them between age 4 and age 17, where they ended violently at age 17. And I volunteered during the Vietnam War to go into the military from college. And while I was in the military, I was it's what we call sheep dipping. They dip into the sheep basically from the military and pick out what they need for intelligence work and this sort of thing. So after I got out of that for 3 years, after being in the Central Intelligence Agency for 2 years there and 3 years in the military, I became a private investigator and continued with my my investigative work and so on. The UFO phenomenon has always been fascinating to me, but more from an interest of what was happening to other people. I mean, I wanted to know, this strange stuff that's going on with me, is it happened to other people? And so I started looking into other people and other events and going to conferences and stuff years back, and goodness sakes, it was just astounding to see how many people have had contact of some kind.
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful that you're out there and continuing along this road to do further investigation. You have some new evidence, some new things you've been uncovering lately. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Some of the things that we do is, the short version of it, is I study medical and scientific evidence of alleged human alien contact. By that I mean, as the Bigelow Foundation and others have questioned me about I said, you seem to be able to find evidence of the alien phenomena, and you seem to be able to find a lot of it. And I said, well, the fact is, the evidence is there. I said, most of us are not really trackers or investigators in the sense of the word, like a police detective and that sort of thing. Many people are investigators in the sense of the word. They study and they talk to people and so on. I guess the difference between me and most people is that I'm looking for the pilots, where most people are carrying a camera around looking for a picture of the UFO. I want the contact. I want it continued. I want to find out answers. I want to know ultimately why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're being surreptitious and secretive, and often simply hiding themselves from what it is we're inquiring about. Most of us want to know, what's going on and so on, and they don't seem to want to be able to tell the truth, or when they do tell anybody anything, it usually is such a whopper or such a stretch that it's always a planet so far away you can never find it, and yet they seem to be able to get here almost instantaneously. So it makes you think they're from the neighborhood somewhat. So some of the things we're looking for are physical evidence of people with this kind of contact. Sometimes these are scratches, marks, bruises, and other things that happen to people that leave a physical trace. Sometimes the alien will physically touch people when they're taking them somewhere, and when this happens, something rather unique occurs, and by that I mean they leave a biological trace on these people. And this biological trace is a fluorescence. In other words, it's like if the alien left a sweat on you, so to speak, that was invisible, it would be visible if you turned a black light on it. If you've physically been touched by them, it will often leave a fluorescent trace in the form of their little fingers, long 3 or 4 long fingers, or other biological traces of fluorescence. That's one of the things we found for sure. Another one, of course, is the implant phenomena, which I discovered in 1960 in my own event at age 12, where I was the recipient of an implant. It wasn't I was particularly smart or unusually brilliant or anything like that. I simply was present and remembered the event. So that's how I discovered the implant phenomena. And to date, we've done 25 surgeries on people alleging human-alien contact, in which we've removed objects from people. And I'll cap that by saying, last of all, I just got back from India, where we did our first implant surgery in India, removing an object from a lady, an Indian lady.
That's excellent. Let me just say that I have a whistleblower who told me just recently. Actually, he'd mentioned it before, but he told me again that anyone who's left the planet and gone, says they're working on Mars or they've been to the moon or whatever, has a something about them that is discernible, that is different, that people who are, I guess, in the know, meaning in the secret space program, can actually tell if they're telling the truth or not. And this is kind of similar, this fluorescence that you're talking about. In other words, this would be an abductee. The other thing is that removing implants is excellent because you also get a piece of evidence, right?
That's true. One of the things that we're interested in looking for initially when we removed implants back in 1990, it was actually the late 80s, but the first public surgeries that I allowed to be viewed and for people to be present was in 1995, after I spoke to 250 surgeons at John Muir Medical Hospital on the alien implant phenomena, in which I made some predictions. I made several predictions about what the implants would be like when we really found them, when we opened them up, looked at them, and so on. And the predictions were, to say the very least, not real exciting I in effect told them that if we found these objects inside these people, what we were going to find, in fact, was that these objects were if they were alien, would leave no, there would literally be no technology inside them. And of course, everybody was sitting there like stunned, you know. And then I said, the second thing we're going to find is that the biology surrounding the objects will be very different, and to the point that it will be not natural to that part of the body. And they really winced at that. And I said, on the top of all of that, I said, the biology surrounding the implants, if in fact when we find them and open them, the biology will show a non-inflammatory response. That in effect it will be concealing the implant, so the body will not recognize that there's something, a foreign object there. Needless to say, everybody was like, oh, okay. And within a year, we did the first public surgeries, and to everybody's shock and amazement, especially the pathologist, he said there is a non-inflammatory response around the cocoon surrounding the implant, the biological cocoon that covered or housed these implants. He said it's a non-inflammatory response. He said that's impossible because that's a keratinous material, and he said keratin only shows up in hair, fingernails, anything outside the body, skin, and so on. He said this is deep inside the body. That's impossible. It can't be. And so we've had quite a bit of interest generated there, and one Nobel laureate simply said, if you can replicate that process, Mr. Sims, outside in a lab, away from this phenomena, so to speak, in a lab, independent of that, he said, you may already have a Nobel laureate find. He said, because organ donor rejection is going to be non-existent if you can replicate that. And I said, well, I appreciate your candor and your goodwill. I said, what lab do you suppose I could send that to and actually trust? And he smiled and said, none.
Exactly.
For sure.
You yourself have an implant. You still have it?
I do not have the implant. It's no longer in my nasal passage. They apparently came back and removed it. Sometimes they do that. Sometimes they're actually expelled due to, and I'll give you an example, your audience, an example here. A lady attended a presentation at a conference where I was having a workshop, and after she went to the workshop, a few months later, her little girl complained of these strange little men that came in her room, and they put something in her nose. And she said, well, I was stunned, and she said, so I did what you said in that workshop and had her sneeze into a Kleenex, and to my amazement, there were 4 little tiny gold spheres about the size of a dull pinhead. And anyway, she lost the first 4. They were so small they fell out of her Kleenex into the carpet, and she lost them. About 2 or 3 weeks later, the entities came back and put 4 more in the little girl's nose, and I got those. I do have them now. And they were studied at York University under the care of Dr. Nick Malakis, under a metallurgist, a tenured professor there, and he says these objects are 51% silver, 49% gold, and he said about the size of a dull pinhead. He said I tried to replicate them, and as a metallurgist, I should be able to easily do that. He said I was not able to replicate them when the surface. They look like a little moon is what they look like. They're little tiny craters all over them. And he said, I'm puzzled. He said that I can't replicate that. And then privately, he asked me a question. He said, what do you think these are for? And I laughed and I said, I suspect that there was I said, for lack of a better term, medication on the outside that the little crater part of it would hold. And once that had been used up, I said, they're so small, they probably would be ejected simply because from sneezing or whatever. And I said, I suspect that's what the purpose of them was. And he said, that is just fascinating. So our next interest is to do a 2 test on the little gold spheres, and that is to determine if the metals of gold and silver are in fact extraterrestrial in origin. And we can do that, and there's a certain test that we can do that will tell us whether it is or whether it isn't.
Okay, but you haven't done the test yet?
No, everybody always says that. You know, I've got some DNA tests I'd like to do too. Right now, they're only $14,000 a test. There's about a half a dozen of these
right
per object, and I figured, $300,000 ought to, pretty well wrap that up. So if anybody out there has got, you know, a couple of 300,000 or 400,000 they want to donate to this, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I do this stuff myself out of my own pocket. I don't beg for money and or go to people and, you know, try to get them to buy into whatever we're doing. I pay for this out of my pocket, and I do it as I can. And so that's just the way it is. So I do it as I can afford to get it done, because I actually have probably close to 20 implants currently, and then of course the fluorescent, probably a dozen samples of fluorescence. And again, the fluorescent samples, one professor said you're going to need about $14,000 per one. So
yeah, that's amazing.
It's not cheap.
You know, that's amazing that you have been doing this for so long, and you are not able to raise the necessary money to be able to analyze these bits. I find that shocking. I actually have to say that, you know, I'm on camera right now, and actually I have an implant right here on my arm. I've had it actually since I was a little kid, and I have a memory of being abducted, and I thought I was shot by what you call a BB gun. I wasn't shot, but after that I had an implant in my arm. And actually, it started in my shoulder and it went down to this part of my arm and just stayed there. And it's been there my whole life since then. So I'm another person that you could be doing this surgery on, I guess you call it. But I don't have any money. So
well,
I never...
Now, the surgeries themselves, whenever we do them, and like the trip on India, I fund this myself. And sometimes we get doctors to assist us in doing this. I had a cardiovascular surgeon that before he went to the Iran-Iraq War and into that theater, he did our work for us. And in fact, at that particular surgery on that one patient, we had a brain surgeon present and a cardiovascular surgeon, and of course myself. And but the thing is that when we do these, initially, like I said, we removed them, and at this point, I'm devising testing now in which we're basically interested in ringing the dinner bell, so to speak, and seeing if we can obtain a signature by which this thing may communicate. I suspect that some of these are not communicating, quote unquote, with a sound necessarily or anything like that, but in fact through neurochemistry. And that's why some of these things seem to affect the behavior of some of the people that they're in. At least that's the report of some of the abductees.
Sure. Well, in your case, you've got this whole sort of stash of ones that you've gotten through one means or another. It is fascinating because we do know, I'm not sure what your perspective is on this, and I'd like to hear it. But we do know that some abductions are done in concert with the military, meaning on this planet with the help of ETs that are also seen by the abductees, but they are accompanied by military. And so we call them, you know, as you know, MILABS and so on. So is there any, or have you ever had anyone approach you to talk about maybe the difference between alien implants that come from ETs that are even possibly beneficial versus tracking devices, in essence, that might be put in by the military, you know, working with grays? And some of those grays may be actual entities, or some may be programmable biological, you know, like in essence, little robots.
Well, there's several ways I can approach this. Number one is during that, when I spoke to the 250 surgeons at John Muir Medical, one of the things I said was, if we find any of these are human in origin, if the implants are actually human origin, I said there will be a discernible technology present. And I said, so that's going to make this an extremely easy to define the difference between the two. And to this day, we've not found, quote unquote, any MILAB implant cases. Now, I have talked to people who claim to be one guy had about like 25 implants in his skull, and he told me, oh my God, they did this to me and they did that. And I said, now be careful when you tell me these things. I said, because I said, I teach how to determine whether people are lying or telling the truth at a college level. And I said, I'll go through you like a hot knife through warm butter. So just be sure you're telling me the truth here and don't make up anything or stretch stuff. And, you know, the phenomena can be real without you making it something else. And anyway, he sent me the x-rays and everything, and I swore on a stack of Bibles that this was all the military did it to me or whoever. And anyway, I'd had them checked by our doctors, and they said this is part of these are part of a brain surgery that happened to this individual.
Wait, what?
So I said, so I wrote the guy back and I said, sorry, you know, nice try. We think this kind of stuff goes on, but you're not the candidate in which it happened.
Oh, right.
You've had a surgery. This is very medical. It's very doable. It's in anyone with medical training, and that certainly has done any kind of brain surgery. And a brain surgeon will look at that, or not even a brain surgeon. I mean, any good doctor can look at that and tell you exactly what it is. And it has nothing to do with aliens or the intelligence community or anybody else. Dr. Carla Turner was a dear friend of mine, and we used to discuss this off and on.
Well, she was absolutely fascinating person.
Yeah, she was for a fact. And I said, Candy, I said, she said, I want you to, this is really, you'll love this. She said, I know you programmed an abductee and you built some kind of technique to bypass what the alien can do to humans, and you got her to defend herself, and she actually tore the eye cover off the alien. I said, that is true. I said, actually, she did it twice on 2 different occasions. And she said, well, that's just fascinating. She said, what I want you to do, Derrel, is to get one of these MILABS cases and teach them how to do this and do that. And I said, Candy, that's not a good idea. And she said, oh, but I said, listen to me carefully. I said, I'm gonna let me lay it out for you, and then you tell me if you want to do it. She said, okay. I said, let's say we got this perfect MILAB person, real case, not one of these people that had a surgery and they want everybody to think they really are a MILAB case, real case. And I said, so what we're going to do, I'm going to teach her all these skills, and then we're going to send her. So the next time they come and get her, they come in the middle of the night with these machine guns into her house, which always kind of befuddled me, why military police guys would show up with machine guns in the middle of the night, somebody in her nightgown. I mean, that part of it didn't work very well for me. I said, but let's suppose all that's true. And then they take them down to the underground base, which normally seems to be right in the local neighborhood. That again didn't make any sense to me. So they take them down to this deep underground base, 100 stories, 1,000 stories down, however far it is. And then the guys are over there laying on the table, and the Greys are doing something somewhere else, and these 2 guys are taking a smoke with their taking a break or something, and their machine guns laying over there, and I programmed them to do all the stuff he wanted me to do, and she goes over, she wakes herself up, she goes over, grabs an M16, locks and loads, and draws down on these guys and says, all right, you guys, I got you. I said, probably if that happened that way, she's never going to come home.
Right.
You just had me kill a MILAB person because they're never going to let her come back. I mean, they can't for lots of reasons.
For
so
sure.
I said, I don't think that's a good scenario. I said, I think we need to get some good evidence of the MILAB case without endangering our MILAB person here. I said, I don't want to be a part of that sort of thing. I said, I want results and evidence, but I don't want anybody hurt getting that. I'd much rather them come back with some hair sample or a scratch on some of these characters, which would give us some DNA. That would be pretty acceptable to me. I'd like that real well.
Okay, now let me ask you this. I've interviewed a woman named Niara Isley, and she has written books about this. She's been on the speaking circuit. I did an interview with her in the very early days. She seems like a very credible MILAB. And have you ever met with her or talked to her?
I don't recall her name right offhand. I've talked to a number of people, and at the behest of Carla Turner, Dr. Carla Turner, I took on 3 people that came to me that claimed to be MILAB cases, and I told them all the same exact thing. I said, whatever. I said, this is not what I normally do. I said, but I will work with you because Candy has asked me to, and so on. And I said, but if I catch you lying to me, if I catch you stretching the truth, or catch you lying or fabricating or blowing things up a little bit, I said, I will drop your case. And that's it. And I caught all three of them stretching the truth a bit. One lady, I caught her in an outright lie. I said, after she had been arrested for it, and she said no. And I said, mind if I run a background on you? She says, not at all. And I did. And then she had a previous arrest warrant. And I said, I thought you said you weren't arrested. And she said, oh, I forgot about that. And I said, well, okay. I said, that's called lying where I come from. And you knew it, and you were arrested. You knew about it. So I said, so therefore, as far as I'm concerned, you're not credible for me, because if you'll lie to me about something little like that, you probably lie about some other stuff. And I said, so I really don't want to work with you. So that ended my tour with MILABS at that point. And of course, Candy died. And but the thing is that I suspect that there are MILAB cases that are quite real, and so on. I just wish there was some evidence that would support it other than a claim. The claim doesn't make it not true. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that at some point you can't have events happen. And I'll give you a perfect example. I'll put the onus on me. In 1990, I told, 1991 and 92, I told the Houston UFO Network, and John Schuessler was present. He was vice president of MUFON at the time. He was visiting us. And then an engineer was present. There's three of us on this panel. And I said, I asked John, I said, have you found any real evidence of MUFON? He said, not really. And I said, as his engineer, have you found any as a UFO investigator? He said, not at all. I said, okay. I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to study this phenomenon for 2 years solid. And if I don't find any evidence, I quit. They said, don't do that. And I said, listen to me. If I can't find any evidence, then there isn't any. I said, if there's this many abductions going on, there is, in fact, evidence. I guarantee it. And since then, I've found a lot of evidence. And so I'm very comfortable that the alien contact and the alien abduction phenomena is absolutely real, because we have plenty of evidence of it. When women tell me they were sexually assaulted and artificially inseminated and so on and everything, I don't believe every story, because I've found some of those not to be true. But I did find cases where, in fact, I did a MUFON conference in Minnesota, in which they had already pronounced, their doctors had pronounced that, in fact, there were no credible cases of these women being sexually assaulted and producing these hybrid children and so on. And I said, I beg to differ. And they said, okay, well, what evidence do you have? And I said, thank you for asking. And I produced at that point, to the shock and amazement of these individuals, I said, you might want to fasten your seatbelt. And then I produced some sonograms of an alien entity inside a woman.
Oh, wow. You're kidding.
Needless to say, that room was, you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. So I said, I don't care what your doctors have said. I said, I'm not calling them liars or anything like that. I'm just saying they have not seen all the evidence, obviously. What the evidence they've seen has convinced them differently. But I said, there is other evidence that you don't know about. So this was a rather fascinating situation as far as I'm concerned. And again, I believe that there is a lot of evidence out there. I do. And I just think that that we should give these people a big hand for coming forward and testifying to their events and so on, because a lot of these people are telling the truth, and many of them are just doing the best they can. They just don't know they don't know how to deal with all this. They just don't. But I've had,
okay. There's something.
Cases.
Let me just interrupt you right there. I just want to say to everyone, there is something bizarre going on right now. Sounds like my downstairs neighbor, even though it's evening here, almost 8 o'clock, seems to have decided to drill something. So there's some drilling in the background. Don't ask me how this is happening. Never happens. So I hope people can still hear you good. And, you know, if somebody's having trouble, just let me know if there's any, problem. hopefully, it's kind of a dull sound, so hopefully it's not interrupted. This is excellent information, Derrel. Let me ask you, though, because actually I am aware of an underground base in, say, Moffett Field, for example, and I was born in Moffett Field Hospital. And there is a person that I interviewed who basically kind of in a nonverbal way, well, first of all, he told me he worked there, and he told me in essence that they had abductees there, like military MILABS, that kind of thing, for genetic engineering purposes and other things. Now, one of the things that you said was that you think that if there is military there, that the implant won't, if it would be like American made, or maybe not American, but earthly, and it would have some technology detectable, etc. But what you haven't sort of alluded to, the possibility is that if the military is working on abductions with ETs, then the ETs could be providing the technology. So they wouldn't be using earthly technology, they'd be using ET technology to do the implants, but they may be doing the actual abductions and the operations, whatever you want to call them, in underground bases here on Earth. And so, well, have you considered that?
That's entirely possible. It's possible. The thing is, here's where I'm at as a real detective. I don't deal in a great deal of hypotheticals, and when I say hypothetical, to me that means I have to be able to. In other words, if I tell you alien implants exist, I better have done some surgeries, and I better have them. If I tell you that, if I can tell you of a certainty that alien abductions exist, I can tell you not because I read it in a book or because somebody told me so, but simply because I've already experienced it myself, and I have independent evidence of that. So a lot of things that we, I guess, and it does, again, this doesn't mean things are not true. It just means that I can't always prove them to be. I can't prove everything everybody claims to be factual. For instance, I can't prove that because I have no direct evidence that the United States government or whomever is out there abducting people and are in league with the aliens, so to speak. I can't prove that. I don't have any direct evidence of it. I have plenty of stories. Don't get me wrong. But I have to be able, whenever I make a statement, I have to be able. I want to be able to go into court and provide evidence that in fact it's real. So
okay, now I'm just curious. Have you ever?
Things for the hospitals and so on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, I love the way you think, because you're so, on it in terms of logic and all of that. And you are following clues like a real detective. And that's what this field really does need. Have you ever heard my interview with Norm Bergram? He wrote a book called The Rings of Saturn, and he's a scientist. He did disappear after I interviewed him. He said he was going basically. They were building him a lab, and he was 85 years old, but extremely bright, wide awake, and it's a fascinating interview. I do encourage you to watch it. Had you ever heard of Norm Bergram?
There was a gentleman, and I don't know if it's the same one or not. He showed some pictures of alien bodies, and he was near death. Literally, he was dying, and he gave an interview, and I'm not sure if he was interviewed by someone else, I think, but I'm not sure if this is.
No, this man's a physicist, and he admitted to having worked.
And he claims to work at Area 51 and everything else. And,
well, this man worked at Moffett Field, underground at Moffett Field in California. So anyway, it's a fascinating story. He has a book out there, as I say, called The Rings of Saturn, and talked about the ships in the rings of Saturn. He had some theories about that, and some maybe he had basically he'd worked for the government most of his life, but he was still alive, so he wasn't dying. He didn't have any pictures of aliens, this man, He was, you know.
This particular guy did, and I several people had sent me this interview, and I thought, well, I'll look it over. And I listened to the guy carefully. I looked at these alien bodies, and I didn't buy it right off the bat because, first of all, I run a support group for alien abductees, and I've got 1,650 cases worldwide. And if I've seen these entities and I kind of know what they look like, and actually have real photography that you won't find on the internet of them,
sure.
And if I know that, and then I see these photographs this particular guy had done, he claimed that were aliens and so on. It looked like a rubber alien that somebody glued together to me. But I sent usually when people send me pictures of aliens and things like this, first thing I do is put them on send them to my abductees in different places around the world and ask them, have you ever seen this guy? And of course, none of them had, and they wondered, well, what, you know, of course, that kind of doesn't mean that it's not an alien. It just means that it's a red flag, but that's not one anybody's ever seen before.
Somebody here is, I don't know if we've got a live chat room here alongside this interview, and someone here is saying the name Boyd Bushman. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's the guy.
That's the guy. Okay, so that's a different, obviously a different guy.
With that interview for me, it was a fun interview. Don't get me wrong; it was very entertaining. But the thing that bothered me was that he started calling the little aliens the ranch hands. He said they're kind of like ranch hands, you know, they're this, that, and so on. And I was amused to no end because that's the exact term that I use when I describe them in my book, since I have a cowboy background.
Oh.
I wonder where he got that term.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if he actually die, because I don't know. Recently,
I believe that as I understood, he did. As soon as I started hearing quotes from my own book, as if it were out of his own mouth, something he'd seen at Area 51 or whatever, I wasn't really that interested.
I see.
So
the guy I'm talking about is called Norm Bergram. Totally different person. Okay, so in terms of where you're going now and what your research is bringing you to, can you talk a little bit about you know, what are the new horizons, if any, that you're encountering?
Oh, well, a lot of interesting things, Carrie. Quite fascinating. Let me back a tiny bit for your audience to set this up a little bit. So it'll be informative and hopefully a good review. The alien, from my perspective, and this is strictly my perspective. It doesn't make it right, or it's my view after studying this thing for over 40 years. My perspective on the alien is that these entities, and let's take I call them the usual suspects. If you line them up like we do in a police lineup, there's these different entities. One of them looks like an alien, that quote-unquote alien, a little tiny gray alien, but bug eyes and all that, skinny little guy. And then there's one that looks just like him that's taller, and the little guy's got an IQ of about 80. He's not that smart. He can't even get your clothes on right half the time. He makes all kinds of mistakes, puts you in the wrong location, the wrong bed, wrong look. He makes mistakes. The second one that looks just like him that's taller is often referred to by abductees or contactees as the boss. Or the doctor. He looks just like the little alien, but this guy's got an IQ of about 150. He's pretty sharp. He's smart, and he's not a really nice guy. He's kind of nasty. He treats the little guys pretty bad. Then you got another entity that looks like a reptile. And then you got another entity that looks like a praying mantis. His IQ is about 180. He's really sharp. And then you got a humanoid. His IQ is pretty high, pretty well up there and everything. But here's my point. If you look at this stuff carefully, and again, you put your cop hat on, not your UFO hat. Your UFO hat, and I mean this kindly because that hat fits me too. If when we wear a UFO hat only, we can be fooled. We have been fooled before by fakes, liars, hoaxers, and people who are simply mistaken. And we've even fooled ourselves. My point is that if we wear only a UFO hat, we have that possibility of being fooled fairly easily. If we put our cop hat on and look at this phenomena, you look at things totally different. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything right now. It can be what it is. And when I look at the aliens, each of these entities, and I studied them this way, and then done some other work on it as well, not just the obvious here. The obvious to me is that the DNA of each of these creatures comes from planet Earth. It didn't come from Zeta Reticuli or any other place. You say, well, that can't be right. Now, wait a minute. First of all, you've got a Nordic, quote unquote. Well, that looks just like a human being. Where do you suppose they got the DNA for that? Well, maybe Zeta Reticuli, but probably planet Earth some other time in history. You look at the reptile, and you say, well, I wonder where you get reptile DNA. We'll travel over to Saturn and get some. I doubt if there's any reptiles over there at Saturn. But you can find plenty of them, all kinds of them, right on Earth. You look at the praying mantis, and you say, I wonder where we can get mantis DNA. Well, it probably isn't going to be at Alpha Centauri. Probably it's going to be planet Earth. So what I'm saying is every one of these creatures, the DNA probably comes from here. It's pretty obvious to me. And somebody came here, somebody, quote unquote, came here, got DNA from here and created and hatched, cloned, or manufactured these entities for the purpose of interaction with mankind.
Okay, now let me ask you this, because you say if you got the DNA, but you don't have the DNA, right? I mean, you have the DNA from the creatures here at Earth, but none of those, I'm assuming you don't have Nordic or actual praying mantis. I don't know, if you're talking about having their DNA, the actual beings.
Well, actually, we appear to have some of that too. We don't know how strong that evidence is because,
okay.
Because again, there are tests that have to be done. I mean, and speaking of which, I had fairly recently had 3 different people come on board to do some DNA testing for me, and some of the evidence that we have, because. For instance, in the fluorescence alone, I probably got close to 15 samples. What does that mean? Well, if the DNA is in fact correct, and it is gathered correctly, of course, I gathered it myself, but the fact is, if that stuff can be verified, we probably, okay, to back up and make it even simpler. When you arrest a criminal for a felony, the very first thing they're going to do after they if you're arrested, is they're going to fingerprint you, and then they're going to take a DNA sample. Why would they do that? Because if any other crime comes up with of your familiarity, so to speak, whatever the crime you did, they're going to look at you first, and that DNA, if your DNA is at that crime scene, they got you. What we have is about 15 samples from these entities, and we need to know if that DNA is all the exact same or if, in fact, it's all different. And I suspect that it is also different, probably as different as each of them are. And if that's true, we have the first DNA database of alien entities on Earth. I mean, that's pretty fascinating stuff to me. That's pretry neat.
Okay, so you have the DNA, but you haven't had it tested. Is that right? Because it costs money, or what?
Well, unfortunately, we had some of it tested years ago. Had been an attempt to have it tested about 10 or 11, but over 10 years ago. And the friend of mine that I trusted this all to lost the samples. They were destroyed. Needless to say, I was very upset.
No, I just want to stop. Sorry. I want to stop you right there, because that's a loaded statement. And I just want to ask you, is that person still your friend? And do you know exactly what happened then?
Yes, they still are my friend. They just made some mistakes. The people do. So what kind of mistake? I keep the evidence myself. I don't send it anywhere unless I'm there.
Right. Yeah. But no, I just want to ask you, was it stolen? No, was it stolen? Was the evidence stolen?
The best way to describe it is mishandled.
Okay.
Bungled would be a better word in my opinion. But the point is that we do have new samples now, and well collected, and very excited about this. And one professor at MIT told me, he said, Derrel, he said, you have some of the most amazing evidence I've ever seen. He said, your work in the fluorescence field alone, the discovery you made in fluorescence, he said, deserves a scientific paper. And I said, I don't think anybody in the world would ever allow a scientific paper be written by, first of all, by me, and second of all, on the subject of fluorescence. He said, that's not true. He said, I'll not only guarantee you will be published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, he said, but I'll help you write it or write it for you. So I may take him up on that, but again, we've still got to do a little bit of study first. But we've had 3 people volunteer to help. One of them was a tenured professor, assistant professor at the university, and everything was going fine for about a month. And then one day, for some bizarre reason, I have no idea why, he never spoke, said another word or anything. And we couldn't have gotten along better, and he couldn't be more excited. He had heard me on a radio program, and he was excited and everything. And for some reason, and finally I called the university and I said, is he around? And they said, yeah, he's coach sitting right over there. And well, I looked around for him, and they never did come back to the phone. I mean, I finally hung up. But we've had 3 of these happen in a row.
Right. Well, I mean,
I was told by her boss, she said, and of course the question is how their boss find this out. She said, if you do any work for that guy on the alien phenomenon, on this DNA, this fluorescence, she said, I'll fire you. And she said, I'm doing it on my own time with my own. She said, you're not listening. You will be fired. So we lost her. And anyway, it's just been like that. It's just been an insane asylum.
That's very typical. It's kind of like my witnesses that have great stories to tell, and then they disappear in thin air. Actually, I want to ask you a couple things, because, I'm doing these interviews and I have whistleblowers, etc. Have you ever talked to John Edmonds?
Sure, of course.
You have? Okay. And have you ever gone out to his house and gathered evidence?
I certainly have.
And how have you been able to test that evidence and see if there was any validity to it?
Well, the evidence has been tested by Dr. Levensgood and Phyllis Buttinger did some work on it. They came to 2 different conclusions, but I spoke to Dr. Levensgood about the evidence, and he was rather excited. He made some wonderful statements to John and also to me independently, and said, in fact, you guys have got the smoking gun. And I said, okay. And I said, but what does that mean to you? I said, that's a great statement for people wearing the UFO hat. That's not a very good statement for a detective. What is a smoking gun? What does that mean? And he said, by that, he said, I think that, he said, what you have here is the alien DNA and the cattle mutilation DNA in the same sample. Now, if Dr. That can be substantiated, that's pretty fascinating stuff. And he said, I've done this test and that. And I said, I understand, and I greatly appreciate what you're saying and what you've done. And I know your associate, and I said, but at some point, I said, this is going to have to be peer reviewed by others. It's going to have to stand some super scrutiny. He felt very comfortable that it would stand peer review without any problem, and I certainly hope it does. I mean, I of all people, I collect evidence, so but by the same token, I can't go out and say, thus saith, and it's this simply because I want it to be. It has to be that. And right. Again, it's something that when you make claims like this, you better make sure that you're making claims that you can literally back up. And I want the UFO community has made a lot of claims, many of which either can't be substantiated or won't be substantiated or simply were not true.
Okay, but in this case,
that we have made that were true,
right.
And I'm hoping that this is going to be one of the big ones.
Okay, so what I want to ask you about that is, So has it gone to peer review, or has it gone to the next step, or where is that in that process?
Well, again, it goes back to the volume of money. And here's a good example to show how the interest is in it. One day I got a call from John, and he said he told me that there were a couple of people there, and he was pretty intimidated by them being there. And I said, well, who is it? And he said, it's this is the two guys that came up here from the Derrel Foundation. I said, well, put them on the phone. Let me talk to them. And they said, they got on the phone and discussed it. I'm ex-so-and-so, I'm an ex-FBI, special agent, whatever. And the other guy said, I'm a special agent, I'm an ex-FBI. I said, well, I'm ex-CIA. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. That's like saying, you know, I've got an ex-wife or an ex-husband. That don't mean a whole lot. I said, you're ex, you're not any of that now. And I said, and don't hold yourself out as if you were, because you're not. Nor am I. I said, I want to know what you're doing up there intimidating my witness. And I said, I want to know what you're doing on the property without ever calling me. Oh, well, we're up here looking for evidence, but you seem to have got it all. And I said, I did, didn't I? It's called good police work, that thing. Didn't leave anything for you at all, did I? Well, we need that evidence. And I said, really? I said, that's interesting. And why is it that you think that we need to just dump everything in your lap? Well, I'm an ex-FBI. I said, ex-FBI doesn't mean anything to me. Nothing. Or you're not listening to me. I said, coming up there and intimidating people and acting as if you can throw around these old police skills that you used to have and police histories. I said, that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not intimidated by you at all. And anyway, they said, well, this needs to be studied by the best people. And it reminded me of the Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant. Who's it going to be studied by? Top men. You know, who would that be? Well, top men, of course.
Right.
And I said, no, I think I'll just hold on to the evidence, and I think we'll find our own top people. That's because I don't mind telling people what it is I found. I said I published my information on implants, and I said I'll publish information on this too. And I said, but I think I don't think very many people would be very comfortable with you, an ex-FBI guy, coming up there, pushing this guy around and scaring him a bit, intimidating him, and everybody just throwing evidence in your lap and say, here, take all the evidence, and I hope we get a report on it. I hope we get this, and I hope we get that. I said, I don't trust that. I said, I have no confidence in it. And I said, I think we'll just hold the cards for ourselves. And when we get it done, we get there, get the money, we'll just do it ourselves. And I said, and we'll publish the results. He said, well, will you give us a copy of the report? And I said, of course. I said, we don't have any secrets. That's not going to be secret to only us and no one else. I said, no, I don't mind. I said, I actually get along very well with Bob Bigelow. I said, I know him. And I said, I don't have any problem with Bob. I said, but the fact is that I don't think that everyone else trusts him. And I don't think that that type of evidence ought to be just left out there for you. And I said, you got kind of already shown your colors and intimidation. I said, I don't buy that as a good investigator to begin with. So the answer is no. You're not going to get anything.
So are you saying that those two guys were sent out by Bob Bigelow?
I'm saying that's what I was told.
Okay. Very interesting story there. So at this moment, in terms of the evidence, you need money, because I have been contacted, can't say any names, by someone who is very interested in this field, who's interested in John's story and other stories like that, and in some ways would probably like to give some money to see the development of more evidence in this regard. Now, what does happen when somebody comes along like that is that they will get intimidated themselves, as you already
that often happens. It does.
Yeah. So I just want to say that out loud, and that the fact that, if anyone is listening, if any of those people are listening, then please do contact me. We can put you in touch with Derrel and then get these things investigated further. And that would be a great thing. Now I want to ask you if you ever heard of Simon Parks. because he claims to be part reptilian, part human, and part praying mantis. He's a political figure in Great Britain, and he's represents people. He's been voted into office. They know he claims this about himself. I've done a couple interviews with him, and he's quite well known on the internet at this time. And I think his job is called a counselor or something like that for a district in Britain. Have you ever spoken to Simon Parkes?
I have not spoken to him. I did see his interview. I think, based on what I saw, that and again, this goes back to programming by the alien. They often will make little children believe that they are their parents. That in fact their parents are not their parents at all. Many abductees and contactees will literally tell you that even though they know biologically their parents are provably their parents, they actually think that they're not. And this is part of a program that's run by the alien. It's easy for Mr. Parkes or anybody to prove they're quote-unquote a mantis or a reptile or anything. There's a simple DNA test that'll prove that, yay or nay, very quick, up or down,
right.
Very simply.
Sure.
I'm not saying he's lying. What I'm saying is that that's probably, if he believes that, this is probably part of a program that they're running on him that is extremely effective. And people will believe this as if it were literally written in the Bible. They believe it absolutely, totally.
Okay. I was just curious. All right. Well, yeah. That's very interesting. Now, in terms of where are you at in terms of underground bases here on planet Earth? Are you aware of them?
Interestingly enough, I actually, for those of you that have an interest, if you want to email me or anything on alienhunter.org, just click on Alien Hunter there and it'll email me. And if you want to see some underground bases, I'll send them to you. We got one over here. It was actually built by a rich Asian fellow for his corporation back in the 80s, I think. Anyway, it'll house about 60,000 people, I think. I think it's for sale. But there are underground bases. I'll be glad to send them an email of underground boring equipment and all kinds of things. It says United States Air Force on the side of it.
Sure.
I mean, the stuff is real. There's no question it's real. The question is, what is it actually for? Where does it go? And of course, I know you have heard 1,000 stories of what all it is and
sure,
and what it isn't. And the fact is that back in the early 90s, a friend of mine who's was a commercial airline pilot and captain for an airline. He spent his money on every weekend he could. He would listen to everybody's story about there's an underground base over here. People would call him and say, "Well, there's this ranch house out in the middle of the desert. I know there's an underground base under there." Well, he would spend his money and fly out there, land the airplane, and go out there and look. And he found no underground bases at all. And I mean, for years, he's listened to all these stories. One day, he went out to an area in California and was flying, and somebody thought there was a base out there. And he found, no question, a high-level military base there, and he stayed pretty well away from it. And in fact, Bill Hamilton was flying an airplane with him and had the camera in hand. And just as they turned and he went a little too close, but he thought he could get away with it. And they snapped a picture of a portion of the pavement on the runway that opened up. That when there's now I'm not saying there's underground base underneath it. What I'm saying is there was definitely a second floor under there, and some type of device came up out of the ground and was, I don't know what the thing was, but they actually had a photograph of it. And that was pretty encouraging to me that an underground, at least something that might be an underground base was there. And it's a fascinating base anyway. I believe underground bases exist simply because the boring equipment's there. I mean, again,
yes,
you can go to court with that. There's the boring equipment, and the Air Force is behind some of it. Got her name on it.
Yes. So
there's no question that it's there, that it's real. What it all is, and that's kind of speculative because, again, anybody can tell any story, and some of them are fascinating. Some of them I think are really true, and some of them are just so off the charts goofy that I don't buy them.
Okay,
But
now,
no question, they're there and something's going on. No question about that.
absolutely. Now, you mentioned Bill Hamilton. You know, he's one of the first people I interviewed, and very interesting guy. Did you ever? I don't know whether or not you ever dealt with his wife, because she seemed to have an interaction with a reptilian being.
I did. I did. I worked with his wife several times, especially when I was out in Arizona and California, and I knew Bill's been her for a long time. And she was having a real tough time with some of her events, particularly the reptile aspect of it. The reptile, for the audience that are not familiar with this, the reptile part of the usual suspects in my lineup are a real nasty bunch of people, creatures, and they're really ragged. They're really awful to human beings in most cases. Anyway, I asked, of course, I always do this. It's not that I didn't believe her story. I did. I thought she was very truthful. Everything I tested and found of her, I found to be quite truthful. Also found that she had been very rattled, and many of us as abductees and contactees have been part of that brainwashing program that these entities do. They do it, and that's all there is to it. And one night, I met with her and Bill, and she brought me a photograph, which I still have to this day. In fact, I showed it to my friend, Ben Foggin, yesterday when he was here, and he just sat there stunned. And I said, this is a picture inside her home. They had a big home at the time, and had a big bright light outside the house on a telephone pole, lit up the outside yard area. And she took a photograph with her camera inside the house as the entity walked in front of the window at some distance away. And she said, that is the reptile. And I don't know what it is, but it is not pretty, and it's kind of a nasty looking thing at a distance. It scared her to no end. And she said, that's the guy right there. That's the one that's been getting me. So the thing I liked about her was that when she could get evidence, she was 100%. Her stories were fine. Like I told her, I said, your stories are good, and I buy into your story and everything. But I said, ultimately, at some point, we in the UFO field have to belly up to the bar. We've got to come up with evidence. We can't just say we believe it and it's all out there, but there isn't any evidence, but that doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. If there are millions of people having contact over the last 50 or 100 years, there is evidence. The fact is, most of us don't know how to find it. That's the difference. If you know what to look for, and I finally published a book, I got tired of people asking me, well, how do you find this evidence? So I published a book called Alien Hunter, Evidence in Light. And it tells you how to find evidence in 3 dimensions, in the everyday light, literally, in a normal light spectrum. Shows you how to find light evidence in the invisible light spectrum, in the infrared and the ultraviolet. And it tells you how I discovered all this stuff and how you can go out and do your own investigations. You don't need me. You can go do your own thing. And the book shows you that. And the second one I wrote, finally, because I had a lot of push about that, was a book on implants. And they're not books for entertainment. They're books like field notes ready for you to practice, to take that stuff out and to go out and search out your own information, your own cases.
Right. That's excellent. And people should, avail themselves of that information if they have questions about their own sort of experiences, etc. Did you know Dr. John Mack?
I knew Dr. John Mack. Yes, I did. And in fact, I did talk to him. The last time I spoke to him was in Istanbul, Turkey. And this is kind of a funny conversation. He said, Derrel, I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. And I looked at him and smiled, and I said, okay. And he said, you seem to have contact abductees whenever you work with people. I have contactees when I work with people. How do you account for that? And I said, your information is not completely accurate. I said, I agree with you that the majority of people you get and work with are probably contactees, or they aren't when you're finished with them. I said, the people I have are both. It's whatever. I said, I don't care what they are. I don't try to change anybody I can't make you be a real one or not. I can't make you be a contactee or an abductee. It's whatever you are is what it is. I can't change your experience. And he says, well, why do you think that? I said, well, I want to say this in the most respectful way I can, because this is going to sting a little bit. And I said, I honor you for your Pulitzer Prize writing. I honor you for your work in the UFO field. And I said, my question to you is, I'm going to set it up with this question. Where did you take your hypnosis training? And he looked at me kind of stunned. And, of course, a bunch of people were there sitting there, a lot of speakers at a huge conference were sitting there listening to this. And he said, I took it from non-professionals. And I said, why did you do that? He said, because they were better than the professionals. I said, that is actually true. I said, you were wise to do that. And then he said, I said, here's my question now that we've got that out of the way. I said, one of the things that happens when an abductee gets abducted is the entity creates wherever they can this false, it's the true false, the true false history. The alien tries to get people to buy into things like the simple form of it is you were taken by a 3-foot owl in the middle of the night, and so on and so on. Well, there aren't any 3-foot owls wandering around abducting people. There aren't. Now, there are people about that size, little entities, that use a visual image to cover themselves and make people think they were a 3-foot owl.
Yeah,
and
we
really,
call that.
it was just a bad dream that you had.
Well, we call this a screen memory.
A screen memory. I said, you would agree with that? And he said, yes, I do. I said, well, what you may not know, and I said, this is the part that's going to sting you a little bit. When you work with people, John, I said, I think what's happening is you're hypnotizing the screen memory. You're not getting real memory. You're hypnotizing the screen memory. When you do that, it will create what I refer to as a screen dream. I said, it's in my book. A screen dream is an endless story that will go on forever. You could hypnotize that person 100 times, and that's obviously we're not abducted for years. So where are all the stories coming from? I said, from the same screen dream. I said, it's a nonsensical, it's not a true story. It's not, you're not hypnotizing some of these people and getting real memory. Some of them you're hypnotizing their screen memory. And that's why some of these stories are endless. And I get abducted every night. No, you don't. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. I'm sorry. It just doesn't happen. And there are people that absolutely believe every word of that, and that's okay. But I said, I think when you do that, I said, it amazes me if that's what's happening to some of your cases, John, that you're not recognizing that you're hypnotizing the screensaver. You're not hypnotizing. You're not picking up. You're getting recall and not memory. I said, it's not the same thing.
Okay, what was his reply to that?
He sat there stunned. Never said a word. He just looked at me for the longest time.
Okay.
And I said, I said, let me give myself a tiny bit of credibility here. I said, Dr. Tinman, I said, he chairs the philosophy department at Tulane, your buddy. He said, your personal friend, I said, has talked to my senior investigator, an engineer, Dale, and he told you in 1994, this was around 2000 when I met John in Istanbul. I said, he told you in 1994, you need to get down to Houston and meet this Derrel Sims and this Dale Musser because these guys are light years ahead of you. I said, your friend told you that, and I said, I have a copy of the letter so I know he sent it to you. I said, it's finally nice to get to see you 10 years later.
Okay, anyway, well, that's very interesting.
We were very respectful of each other. There was no argument.
No, I get that.
It was just a discussion of different kinds of consciousness, and you can hypnotize the consciousness part of somebody and not get the truth.
Well, I happen to agree with that. Now, I can't say anything about Dr. John Mack's actual, witnesses, whatever you want to call them, abductees. I wouldn't presume to know whether that's true in those cases, but it certainly can be true, what you're talking about. Let me ask you something about Dolores Cannon. Did you know her?
I do.
Okay, you know she passed on, right?
Yes, I did. Yes,
Okay.
I did.
So what did you think the same thing about her work?
I was not. A lot of people ask me things about her and what do I think and everything, and I said, look, I live here in the UFO community. I said, and just because I said, first of all, I said, let me explain something to you. That I said, first of all, I'm a master hypnotherapist. A master hypnotherapist is a person that certifies people coming into the hypnotherapy field. In other words, if you got your certification in hypnotherapy, it's somebody like me that certifies you. I said, that's number one. Number two, I'm a medical hypnotherapist. What does that mean? I said, that means I'm qualified to work with people medically in that sense of the word. Third, I'm a hypnotic anesthesia therapist. That means I take people to the OR and do hypnotic anesthesia on them surgically during their operations. So there are a lot of levels on functioning in this area that a lot of people aren't, and they're not qualified for, or don't do, or don't want to do. Maybe that's okay. I said my point is that I have a pretty strong background, and I'm master level NLP. I mean, I've got training in timeline therapy and many other things. I train therapists on top of that, and in some cases even psychiatrists. My point is that I pretty well know what I'm doing, and that's why John and I had a good discussion about different techniques and so on. And I have great respect for John Mack. I always have.
Yes,
I like him a
absolutely.
lot. He's a great man, and he helped the UFO field immensely with
Sure.
his things he did do. And they were just a point of contention in some little area there we were talking about, and it was a professional discussion, not a critical one.
No, absolutely. I'm just asking you from a professional standpoint, because Dolores Cannon, I've read actually several of her books, and she's doing her regressions, but there were some things where she would basically be fishing for her own information, which was a sort of, some people would call it kind of crossing the line a little bit. She had a rationalization for it. I'm not sure it was necessarily a good one, but it seemed to go okay for her. But I am wondering whether you ever felt, I don't know if you ever knew any of her patients, so to speak, whatever you want to call them, abductees. Yeah. Whether they ever came, like, in other words, they went to her and then came to you. Did you ever have anything like that going on with her?
I did. I do. In fact, I have one of this is, and I'll even tell this one if you want to hear it.
Sure.
One of John Mack's. But anyway, let me answer your question here on Dolores. I like Dolores. I've met very few people in my life I didn't like. I like people. In fact, I just love people. And you say, well, I don't like that guy because they're that woman because I don't like them because they're too good. I like differences. I like the fact that God has made all these people in the neatest ways, and they're all different. I think that's pretty cool.
I agree with that.
The fact is that some of the techniques that people practice, and I think you stated very well, cross the line. And I think when we do that without the person's permission or without their knowledge or without the proper etiquette, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. That's just my personal opinion. Some of the techniques that, let me get clinical here for some folks. An engineer called me one time and he said, why don't you, he said, I watched some of the work you did one time with this one guy. He said, that was just horrible. He said that guy had horrible things that the aliens did to him. And I said, yes, they did. And he says, well, why don't you do what Bud Hopkins does? And I said, what's that? Of course I knew. And he said, well, he'll have them get behind a little curtain mentally, and then they can look around the curtain and they can do this. And I said, okay. I said, let me play a little game with you. We're in a restaurant talking about this. I said, I want you to imagine yourself standing out there in the parking lot over by that car. I pointed at these. I said, can you see the car? He said, yeah. I said, picture and visual, imagine yourself right over there. He said, yeah, I can do that. And I said, okay, now I want you to get your body over there and look back toward me. And can you see us here? And he said, sure. I said, John, that's called hallucination. You're not really out there in your body. You're in here, and we're talking, and you're imagining that you're out there. You didn't go anywhere. I I said, do you see the problem with the logic? I said, the only problem with that kind of part of therapy, that kind of protecting people, so to speak, I said, therapeutically, I said, that's a technique we use to destroy memory. For people who have phobias, severe phobias that need to be stopped, and it's disrupting their lives. I said, we use techniques like that to destroy memory. Why would you use something like that to help you? So he never, that was the last of our conversation. He never said anything again about it. So I said, why don't you just do the engineering and you just let me do the memory recovery? I said, I think I could do that.
Okay, so you have an abductee who came over from John Mack, who now has
yes.
dealt with you.
This was fascinating. This was the second. Let's see. That was the second set of surgeries that we'd done, and the Japanese were there, and anyway, we're in a hotel room with one of the doctors. The doctor and a couple other people were there, and the Japanese were there talking. We're getting China Airlines documents and everything. And then this lady was there. She, a rather brilliant woman, just brilliant. And she says, well, and everybody was calling, it's just me and the doctor there. And she said, I just think all this is just a bunch of bunk. And I said, okay. And she said, well, anyway, I'm going to go. And I said, okay, have a great day. And the doctor looked at me and said, what in the world? I mean, the lady shut the door and left. And I looked at him and I just go, shh. And about 30 seconds later, we heard this. And he goes over and opens the door. And she's come in with her little knapsack and her computer. And she's got it hanging down toward her feet, and she's in tears and says, oh my God, they're coming back to get me. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And she started crying. And of course, the doctor looked at me like, what in the world? That's the same one that just left and said, we're all nuts. And I just laughed and I said, just be quiet, let her talk. And she started telling me all kinds of stuff, and told me who she was with, and I smiled, and I said, you better keep that quiet. I said, that might get you fired or get you put on the back of the bus. And she said, for sure. She said, I'm moving out here, and the problem is, when I come out here, she said, I think they're going to pick me up on the way. I said, that's highly likely. And she was terrified and scared and everything, and then of course, I gave her a big hug, and we talked for a while, and then she left. And he looked at me and says, what in the world just happened? And I said, well, I said, she's an abductee. And she can't deal with it. And she's surrounded by quote unquote contactees and those who engender that particular belief system, which is fine. I said, but there's not a whole lot of room for abductees in that circle. And she is one, and she don't know what are you going to do? I mean, it's like, you just can't. You can't do that. So anyway, that was a fascinating story. And
are you saying that was one of John? Okay, that was one of John Mack's people.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, that is interesting. You know, one might want to look into that a little deeper in terms of the expectations of the so-called, I don't know, want to call them therapists, want to call it whatever you call yourself. Well stated, Terry.
The thing is, and I told John this, I said, John, I said, you are the opinion, like many people, that these guys are here to save the planet, fix the ozone hole, or they're probably a lot bigger, better, and taller than us, and therefore whatever they do is correct or right, or they're going to help us in some great way. And I said, and God bless America if that's true. I said, I have not found that to be true, but you're thinking, and a lot of people like that, I said, you buy into that, and that's okay. Right. I said, the point is, when people know that about you and come to you, the people that gravitate to you are going to be contactees or people who need to believe that. And I said, you're influencing them whether you want to or not. I said, me, I don't care. I don't care if you And I give you a case in point. A lady came to me and she said, she went to our support group one time, and she told everybody there, they're all nuts. And there's about 42 people there, 44 people. And she said, you're all crazy. She said, I've had wonderful events, and there's nothing wrong with that. Blah, blah, blah. She went on and on and on.
Right.
And she said, they'll work with me and improve it. Not that that's fine with me. I don't mind. I don't care. I don't care. If you've had great events, I'm great. I'm glad. If you haven't, that's okay too. I don't have an agenda. And so I worked with her, and the very first thing, and her husband sitting there with a boom box recording everything. He's going to sue me if I make a mistake. I mean, this is just awful. And she's laying there, and then and we got several witnesses and got it all on film, and she says, the lights are too bright. Turn those lights down. The lights are down. She doesn't realize she's already in the vent. And she keeps screaming, oh my God, leave my brother alone. Stop it, please leave him alone. Screaming and screaming. And unbeknownst to her, there's a witness, a young guy, also in the event, who was also part of our support group in her event.
Ah.
He painted a picture of her. Later, he painted a picture of her on a table with a 7-foot praying mantis over the top of her. And anyway, that was, and then as soon as she opened her eyes, she popped her eyes up and looked at me and smiled and said, see there, I told you everything was positive. Right. I never showed her the picture of the 7-foot mantis over her. I think she had a heart attack. So I don't care. If it blesses her and helps her to think it all went fine and there's nothing going on and they're here to, save our planet, that's fine with me. I don't care. But I want to know the truth if it's me. I want to know what actually happened.
Well, absolutely. Now, I know we've had you for a while, and I really appreciate you doing a great job. You're so clear and, answering questions very directly and great stories. Let me ask you, have you heard of Corey Good and David Wilcock and their story about what they call are the blue avians? Have you heard about this?
I've heard the story of the blue aliens. In fact, if your audience wants to have some fun, all you got to do is go back and look at the movie Avatar.
Yes.
And the guy who made the movie, and
James
find out
Cameron.
where he got the idea for a blue alien. The fact is, blue aliens are, and I think I can answer this question kind of.
Actually, it's not. It's not. Okay, well, hold on. It's not aliens, it's avians. So it's bird beings.
The fact is, these entities, and there are all kinds of entities, it's not just the quote unquote alien, but the fact is there are different creatures that are out there as well, including Bigfoot.
Sure.
That is, he is a these are all, in my opinion, transgenic beings made for the purpose of interaction with mankind at various levels. And the point is that someone has produced these creatures, and in my opinion, the DNA comes from here. And Native Americans, they used to call the little gray guy the ant people, and the taller one, they call them the ant people. And when I asked the Zuni and others, and friends of mine who are Cliff Mahudi and others, says, where do you come up with this name, the ant people? He said, well, because they live inside the earth. And I said, okay, I'll buy that. I said, the second question is, I said, and I'll pull out some pictographs, which are over 1,000 years old, and it shows little antennas sticking off their head. That with big bug eyes and living inside the earth might tend to make you think that they're the ant people. And by the way, those same pictographs I have show the entities stealing the sheep and goats of the Native Americans. In effect, in one case, I have a picture of a pictograph of a UFO and the ram actually being transported up into the ship on the pictograph.
Yeah, I can tell you, we actually went to look at some rock paintings in Sedona that are very, very old from the Indians there, Native Americans, and they do depict some ETs that look, very clearly like ETs. So, yeah, this has absolutely been, and I know they've found some actually rock art in Australia, similar type things.
Oh, yes. They've recently found a bunch more in India, of all things, and some of those are much older than our Native American ones. And again, they basically describe pretty much the same thing. entities that are in fact not like us. They're just a little bit different.
Okay, well, yes, the Mahabharata is also talking about all kinds of UFOs, Vimanas and various ETs as well. The blue aliens, in that case, we have the Syrian blues, which are depicted in the movie Avatar by James Cameron. So yeah, it is a fascinating sort of saga. Let me go through the chat real quick here, if you don't mind. A lot of people asking questions. Now, bear with me because it is not easy to scroll through this chat. Let me tell you, it's something about the way YouTube does it. It slips right through your hands and very easy to lose questions. So I'm going to try to grab the questions, and it won't be in order. So bear with me. So somebody wants to know about the Mount Graham Lucifer telescope. Have you ever gone there or visited it? I have not.
I have not. I've recently heard about another telescope that's been invented that I'm looking into right now. That's it's for your audience. It's absolutely fascinating. And again, if anybody wants to write me at alienhunter.org, I'll send them the article of the science article of this new telescope that's been invented. And in effect, what it does is the exact opposite of what our telescopes do. Our telescopes allow us to see out there everything that's out there that's visible. And of course, then we can use infrared and ultraviolet to see some things that are invisible. This telescope, if in fact the science article is verifiably correct, and it appears to be, it shows us everything that can't be seen. I don't mean just invisible in the infrared spectrum or the ultraviolet spectrum. I mean like dark matter and entities that don't show up, period. And it shows that. It doesn't see, if you point the telescope toward like a planet and stars, you won't see the stars or any of that at all. But you will see the things out there, antimatter and entities that are in fact normally hidden from our, and if you pointed at places around the earth and things like that, you can actually see the entities.
Right.
It's fascinating stuff. I'll be glad to send the article to anybody who wants to.
Yeah, well, you can definitely send me the article.
I will. I'll be glad to.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great. Someone wants to know, have you ever caught an alien?
I have an article I wrote on that. The answer is I've come close 3 different times. The lady that I used, I did some experimentation. One thing I like Dr. Jacobs. He's a very good man as a tenured professor at
oh, well, if you're in touch with David, you're talking about David Jacobs?
David Jacobs.
Okay, I'd like to interview him.
That I disagree with. He said that there's nothing we can do about the aliens. We're in effect in it. They can do anything. We can't do anything. I disagree with that based on not philosophically, but simply by practicality. Because some of our abductees have had our interaction and have decided not to be afraid or be in awe, either one.
Right.
The contactee or the abductee's mentality, and we're part of a program, a pilot program I started back in the 90s, about 93, I think, and in which we had some of our abductees started to obtain evidence and doing things, scratching them, doing different things like that and so on. And one lady tore the eye cover off twice on the different entities. And underneath the entity's eye, she saw a bright red stipple screen with 5 little white lines running across it, like a graph, you might see on a oscilloscope as an example. Now, the amazing thing of that is the people, of course, that are detractors said, well, you hypnotized that woman and made her believe that. That's what you did. Because they just got black eyes, don't have red eyes. I said, they say they had black. He did have a black eye cover, but I said, that's an eye cover. Long story short is 2 years later, the Varginha incident happens in Brazil.
Right.
And all of the entities had bright red eyes. You should have seen the apologies that came to me at that time. Right. Oh, my God. The lady was telling the truth. They have bright red eyes underneath that black. Well, we already know. We've known that for a long time. I figured that out in 1952, when I could see up under his eye cover whenever he came after me in my room as a kid when I was 4 years old. there was something red underneath it. I knew there was something red under there. I saw it.
Fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, someone wants to know about a base in Southern California coast, off the Southern California coast. I don't know if they mean the one near Catalina, in the ocean. You're aware of that? Or maybe they mean the one that Jimmy Church popularized.
They probably mean the one Jimmy Church popularized. I was speaking the night he broke that story at Upar's. I was speaking that night, and he introduced me. Jimmy's a buddy of mine. That's probably the one they're referring to, but the fact is, for those who are in the know and who are digging, there appears to be another underground, at least one other underground base off in the water, and it appears to be alien in origin. And there is another one that's closer to ground. I won't go into that because I'm studying it, actually, and I intend to go up there and look and see if I can.
Okay, well, I have a question for you, because I interviewed Jimmy Church about his, his find, as that happened to be, was really on Google. But, the thing is that, and there were other guys involved, so apologies that I'm not quoting their names, but at any rate, it was a great find. But strangely enough, he was going to go out with a team and do all kind of investigation, and that just quieted way down, and suddenly nobody's investigating anything. Do you know why?
I don't know why, and I wish they would. You'd need to go down that deep. It is deep enough that you can do a mixed gas dive. You don't have to have the heavy-duty equipment like the deep-sea divers, but you can use a mixed gas dive, and you theoretically, because I'm also I have 2 instructorships in scuba diving, in PADI and SSI. You could do a mixed dive and actually go down and check that out. I would love to see that happen.
Yes.
When I was on the reality show for Uncovering Aliens, I did the diving there for looking for an underground base in Lake Michigan. The point is that, in my opinion, if underground bases exist, underwater bases exist, alien or otherwise, I think they're detectable, I think they're findable, and it's a perfect place to put them. If I were going to do an underground base, I would put it underwater.
Absolutely. Let's see, I'm looking, you went to India on a case, it says, and you did mention you had been there recently. Did it pan out? This person wants to know, was it a smoking gun, big as Roswell? Can you talk about that?
It's an interesting case because the individual, I had 2 investigators there that I've been working with for a while, and they put me together with this Indian lady, and I got the money together out of my own pocket, and I literally, about $5,000, went to India and conducted the surgery there, talked to the surgeon involved, and told him who I was, and I didn't mention alien or anything like that. I said, I'm a researcher from the United States. I'm a private investigator, and I study scientific anomalies of medical evidence. And he said, fantastic. And I said, some of the objects we're finding in some of these people are rather strange, because some of them have even turned up to be extraterrestrial in origin, some of the substances. And he was amazed, and I said, here's what I need for you to do. And I said, I don't mean to presume. I said, I know you're the doctor, but here's what we found, and here's the way I need for this to proceed, if I may be so bold. And he said, please do. And I said, here's what we're looking for. And I laid it out, and he said, very well, we'll do that. And so I filmed the whole entire operation, every aspect of it, the interview, the pre and post-op interviews, and with the investigator, I mean, the whole thing. At some point, we'll make some of that available. The individual wanted to be private and quiet, that she does not want to be shown or anything, and that's fine. So when we put out the film and all the other stuff and the data on it, she'll be blocked face-wise out of it, so that there's no identification there for the individual. We always do everything we can to protect her identity. But the answer is, the individual apparently had 3 locations where there seems to be, and I use the word "seem" because just because somebody had a bump or something there doesn't mean it's an implant. It means it's something in there that's a bump or something. And until you actually remove it and look at it, you don't really know. So we did remove the object. I did bring it back with me, and it's still in a biological container. I will work with a doctor, not a doctor, but a person who's skilled and can do surgery. And they'll work with me at MD Anderson Hospital here in Houston. It's cancer hospital. And we're going to put it all on film, and I'm going to remove the biological covering, which I have on every one of the implants. We'll separate that, and then we'll send that off to pathology, which if my thesis is correct, we'll probably know what we're going to find, and a non-inflammatory response and so on. And then the metallurgy with hopefully, I'm going to be on a TV show. I can't mention it because I'm under an agreement, and they would like for me to do the metallurgy on the show, and which I've agreed to do if they'll take it to the lab I want. But I will travel with the object. I will not send it anywhere. I have to be with the evidence because this stuff tends to disappear.
Yep.
Or it comes back with it's not the same thing you sent out, and I've had that happen. And it's not going to ever happen twice. Yes,
absolutely. All right, thank you for that. So, just out of curiosity, so you dealt with the contactee, but you didn't happen to go to the places where he or she said they were abducted? You didn't? Did you go to the site?
I do. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. In fact, while I was in India, we went to not only that location and where here's the amazing thing. The night, the afternoon after the surgery, they abducted my computer. And this is really weird because I got a brand spanking new Air Mack. I mean, brand new, given to me as a private investigator. I do some high profile bodyguard work for people. One of them's a multimillionaire in rare coins and so on. Long story short, he gave me an Air Mack for a tip, of all things, for working for him. And anyway, I'm there with my new Air Mack. I mean, it's great. Everything's working perfect. And all of a sudden, my screen goes off. The computer's working fine. It just won't pass. Well, what in the world? This is insane. I do everything in the world trying to get it fixed. I can't do it. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden, I feel this strange sensation, which I remember from as a kid, because that's when the aliens ran. That's the sensation. And it's not in my room, but it's close. And anyway, unbeknownst to me, the lady who's in another hotel room, some distance away, tells me the next morning that she got really scared, and that's why that says, because I felt like they were there and all this. So she got a phone call from her sister, who's in another city 400 miles away, saying the creatures are banging on the bottom of the lift. She said, I had this dream of these creatures, and she calls them the monkey creatures, beating on the bottom of a lift. That's the elevator. And they were very furious and angry. And she said, why? She said, because you let him take the object out of you.
Oh.
And then her father, who's an engineer, he's having all kinds of strange dreams during the same night, the same time, two different cities in two different hotel rooms. All this is going on.
Wow.
So that was fascinating stuff. And that was all the night of the surgery, the day of the surgery, really, that evening.
Very, very interesting.
I just go to the locations, and we did find, I even went to, they even claimed there were some ghost stories there. I even went and I even have a film of that. That was kind of fun. And I'll post that eventually one of these days too on Facebook or wherever, and we'll have some fun with that, or put it on my alienhunter.org site. But I do that, and I do go to the location. I do check these out and I do it for a number of reasons. Not to traumatize the person, but to, there are reasons that you can, physiological reasons you want to do that. You want to test certain things.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. I'm scanning the chat here. Again, I don't actually see any more questions. So if you did have a question and maybe it got lost somewhere back an hour or two ago, you could ask it again right now. And basically, if you put it all in caps, that would be helpful just to distinguish it. But, we'll, otherwise we're going to kind of wind this down. Derrel, are you, a lot of people might be asking you this, are you speaking anywhere soon, or do you have any, I know you're going to actually, it sounds like you've got a television show you might be seen on, but is there anything you want to announce about anything you're doing in the future?
Well, thank you for asking. As a matter of fact, I do, and there is a conference that I'll be speaking at on I think it's the 5th and 6th of, it's the weekend of the 5th and 6th of March. I'll be up in Ocean Shores area in Washington, and there's a conference there. Again, anybody who wants to write me, I'll be glad to send this to you. I'd love to meet you there. It'd be a lot of fun. I'm not a really negative guy. I don't care what people's belief systems are. I like everybody. I don't care whether you agree with me or not. The fact is that there's a conference there that weekend, and I'm the keynote speaker, and I will be showing things that I'll be showing a ton of evidence. In fact, I actually made a video of my last presentation I did for the conference for Open Minds Conference, and it's an hour and a half long. And the point is that one of the things I show in there, besides the fluorescence and all kinds of fun things and tons of implants and so on, I show a photograph taken by the city of Los Angeles of one of my abductees. He ran a red light, and guess what? You get photographed and you get about a $300 fine. The wonderful news is there's an alien sitting in the back seat.
Oh my God. That's great.
I have the original photograph. I told my abductee, don't you send me a copy of that. You send the original or don't send anything. He sent the original. And I'm sitting here just aghast. The alien is abducting this guy. Sitting in the back seat in the city of Los Angeles, photograph it, and that's the evidence. They should really pay attention, not just try to collect the money and see what's inside some of these photographs. Fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. Someone, let's see, is asking if, I mean, I have to say that, maybe they haven't spent very much time in sort of this investigation themselves, but they're asking if older people are abducted as well as younger people. And I can answer that and say yes, but you want to answer that as well?
Surely. Many people think that as you get older, your abductions will stop. That is, they tend to slow down sometimes because if the woman runs out of eggs and they're after her eggs, and this is an example, that would slow that part of it down. But there are other programs that they run on people, and it's not just collection of eggs or sperm or something like that. There's other programs. And the oldest abductee I had was in her 90s, and she was still being abducted. And in that case, there was actually a witness involved. So that was kind of fascinating. But sometimes they do get us even when we're older. Yes, it can happen. It is less of an occurrence as you're older, but it does happen, yes.
Okay. Someone else wants to know about nightmares, electronic malfunction, and nightmares. So
yes, of course. Electronic malfunctions are reported by abductees. One of my abductees, who is a nurse at a famous hospital here, they most of the time won't let her use a computer because she blows them out, or because electronic things happen that are weird around her. They don't know how to figure it out, but they just laugh at her, make a joke about it, but they keep her away from electronic equipment. So sometimes electronic malfunctions happen. One of them, more notably among abductees, is you'll ask them, do light bulbs go out above you, like on a street lamps? And sometimes you'll hear this, yes, it's weird. Sometimes they'll say, I've seen them go pop, pop, pop as we're driving under them. Why would that happen? And my answer is, probably it's not you that's popping them. It's the UFO and the beam that's whatever between you and the UFO, and the lamp is in between you and that. And that's probably what's popping the lights above your head. You're not seeing the UFO that's up there. It may be invisible or it may be in the dark.
Okay, that's interesting. I certainly have that happen. Let's see. Someone wants to know, are rogue waves a consequence of underwater bases or crafts?
That's entirely possible. Again, that's one of those questions I can't answer, because if I say I can give you my opinion, but I can't say that it is so, because if I said so, I would just simply be pontificating about something I don't know to be true. So I can't say that it is. It makes sense to me that their rogue waves or unusual wave activity could be the result of something like it. My first answer would be I would suspect something more geologic, with respect to the Earth movement, Earth crust movement. But if that is not the case, some of the Earth crust movement may be the result of a UFO. I don't know. There's certainly some massive UFOs that have gone underwater, and that's a possibility. I couldn't say that it isn't. I simply couldn't say that.
Right. Okay. Someone else wants to know if you ever feel like you have been programmed.
Well, programming is a byproduct of this phenomenon, and just because I'm the alien hunter, just because I'm the tough guy or whatever, that doesn't mean anything in the sense of the word. Well, Derrel didn't get programmed. Yes, he did. Oh, yes, he did. The programs are still running in me like they always have been. The only difference is I've got a pretty good handle on most of them, but I am not impervious to the effects of programming. One of the effects of programming is this, and this is awful. I'll ask abductees many times, you go to a conference, say, okay, how many people feel like you've seen a UFO? And the hands go up. How many people have seen a UFO real close? And the hands go up. How many people came back with an artifact, like an implant or whatever? Okay. How many people, blah, 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 and everything? And then you start asking them, would you go get an x-ray for me? Hands will go down. They are designed, one of the programs they run in us is to hide or to not make evidence available, even though you have even the x-ray evidence of it. Many of these abductees will not do that.
Yes.
And it's a program. Right. It's a program that run. It's nothing wrong with you. It's just a program that's being run, and you're being obedient.
Yep, absolutely. Another person wants to know if you know anyone in Switzerland that can be contacted concerning abductions, contacts, maybe a regression therapist or whatever, I suppose.
I've had some contacts in Switzerland. The answer to the question is yes, I do. Email me at go to alienhunter.org and just click on Alien Hunter and ask the question, and I will send you my contact here, over there, and they'll put you in direct contact. And I've spoken in Switzerland several times, and I'll put you in contact with. Absolutely, glad to do it. Glad to help.
Okay, all right. So let me see. What do you think of Kepler beings? I'm not sure what those are.
I'm not sure what we're talking about there. If they can explain it,
maybe it's a wrong spelling or whatever.
It could be.
Okay. So yeah, I think maybe they're saying Kepler. Not sure. Okay. Anyway, I know we've had you on the show for a while. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been absolutely great having you. And is there any closing remarks that you want to make, or advice to people, whatever?
I do, and I thank you for the opportunity. You've been a very, very good hostess, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak to your people. It's been a real pleasure. My closing statement is this. Like I've said before, we all have a UFO hat. Our UFO hats have been fooled before. So I wear 7 different hats that in my research. When I work, I have a medical and scientific hat. It doesn't think like any of my other hats. My top hat, my PI hat, it is brutal. You ain't gonna like the cop hat at all. If it didn't believe anything about you, and it thinks you're probably lying. I have a spirituality hat. I have a Native American hat because I am Native American. All these different hats give me 7 different sets of eyes to look at evidence and to look at a case. So more hats that you have that you can use are going to help you, and they're going to bless you in your research and work that you're doing. And so I'm going to close with this statement. The map is not the territory. You can look at a map all day long, but when you look at your map and then you look out the windshield at the land out there is the territory. The map is just it's not the territory. But unfortunately, many people in the UFO world, again, still wearing their UFO hat, the map is the territory. But the good thing about maps, if they're accurate, they can give you an accurate description of what the real territory is or what it may be when we really see it. Crop circles are not the territory. They may just be maps. Implants are not the territory. They may be just maps. UFOs aren't the territory either. They may just be maps too. In other words, the menu is not the meal. It may look like the meal, But I promise you, if you eat it, you'll find out the menu is not going to taste anything like the meal. It's a Mack. And the waiter is not the chef. The little guy that picked you up and brought you here and did all the stuff, he's not the guy that prepares the meals. He's not the boss. Trust me on this.
Okay.
He's not even close.
Very well.
He's just the waiter.
Well said. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Derrel. Love to have you back in the future. Please stay in touch. And thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a great night. Okay, hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. I'm here with Derrel Sims, and he goes by the moniker Alien Hunter. So he's a veteran researcher of anomalous scientific studies. He will discuss his quest to unveil the hidden agendas behind alien abductions and alien implants. This includes new work on the DNA of abductees who claim their parents were unwitting surrogates for their alien abductors. And that paragraph is on my website, and I'm just going to jump to his background here. He is a researcher, counselor, international speaker, private investigator, and reality TV star. Derrel Sims, the Alien Hunter, is the world's leading expert on alien abductions. His 38 plus years of field research has focused on physical evidence and led to his groundbreaking discoveries of alien implants and alien fluorescence. As a former military police officer and CIA operative, Sims has a unique insight into the alien organization, which he believes functions similarly to an intelligence agency. Sims is also a compassionate and skilled therapist who has helped hundreds of alien experiencers from all over the world come to terms with what they've witnessed. And he has quite a long bio. It's all on my website. And I just want to welcome Derrel Sims. It's great to have you on the show, Derrel. It's actually wonderful and an honor, because I have to tell you that I do refer people to you all the time.
Well, thank you, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and hopefully we'll get to some of the technical details straightened out. But I'm delighted to be here tonight, and hope that I can bring something new and a little different to your program tonight for alien abduction and contact.
Excellent. And so at this moment, can you kind of augment this this discussion that we've just had? In other words, the overview that I gave. You have a huge bio here, actually. And for the people that don't know who you are, it'd be great for them to see more or hear more.
Sure. First of all, you might refer to me as a captive audience in the alien abduction business, simply because at age 4, that's when I had my first experience. So I'm not just a person who's read about this and so on. I've actually experienced it firsthand. And many of my events were conscious. There were approximately 10 of them between age 4 and age 17, where they ended violently at age 17. And I volunteered during the Vietnam War to go into the military from college. And while I was in the military, I was it's what we call sheep dipping. They dip into the sheep basically from the military and pick out what they need for intelligence work and this sort of thing. So after I got out of that for 3 years, after being in the Central Intelligence Agency for 2 years there and 3 years in the military, I became a private investigator and continued with my my investigative work and so on. The UFO phenomena has always been fascinating to me, but more from an interest of what was happening to other people. I mean, I wanted to know, you know, this strange stuff that's going on with me, is it happened to other people? And so I started looking into other people and other events and going to conferences and stuff years back, and goodness sakes, it was just astounding to see how many people have had contact of some kind.
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful that you're out there and continuing along this road to do further investigation. You have some new evidence, some new things you've been uncovering lately. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Some of the things that we do is, the short version of it, is I study medical and scientific evidence of alleged human alien contact. By that I mean, as the Bigelow Foundation and others have questioned me about, they said, you seem to be able to find evidence of the alien phenomena, and you seem to be able to find a lot of it. And I said, well, the fact is, the evidence is there. I said, most of us are not really trackers or investigators in the sense of the word, like a police detective and that sort of thing. Many people are investigators in the sense of the word. They study and they talk to people and so on. I guess the difference between me and most people is that I'm looking for the pilots, where most people are carrying a camera around looking for the picture of the UFO. I want the contact. I want it continued. I want to find out answers. I want to know ultimately why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're being surreptitious and secretive, and often simply hiding their themselves from what it is we're inquiring about. Most of us want to know, you know, what's going on and so on, and they don't seem to want to be able to tell the truth, or when they do tell anybody anything, it usually is such a whopper or such a stretch that it's it's always a planet so far away you can never find it, and yet they seem to be able to get here almost instantaneously. So it makes you think they're from the neighborhood somewhat. So some of the things we're looking for are physical evidence of people with this kind of contact. Sometimes these are scratches, marks, bruises, and other things that happen to people that leave a physical trace. Sometimes the alien will physically touch people when they're taking them somewhere, and when this happens, something rather unique occurs, and by that I mean they leave a biological trace on these people, and this biological trace is a fluorescence. In other words, it's like if the alien left a sweat on you, so to speak, that was invisible, it would be visible if you turned a black light on it. If you've physically been touched by them, it will often leave a fluorescent trace in the form of their little fingers, long 3 or 4 long fingers, or other biological traces of fluorescence. That's one of the things we found for sure. Another one, of course, is the implant phenomena, which I discovered in 1960 in my own event at age 12, where I was the recipient of an implant. It wasn't I was particularly smart or unusually brilliant or anything like that. I simply was present and remembered the event. So that's how I discovered the implant phenomena. And to date, we've done 25 surgeries on people alleging human alien contact, in which we've removed objects.
What you call a BB gun. I wasn't shot, but after that, I had an implant in my arm. And actually, it started in my shoulder and it went down to this part of my arm and just stayed there. And it's been there my whole life since then. So I'm another person that you could be doing this surgery on, I guess you call it. But I don't have any money. So I never.
Now the surgeries themselves, whenever we do them, and like the trip on India, I fund this myself. And sometimes we get doctors to assist us in doing this. I had a cardiovascular surgeon that before he went to the Iran Iraq War and into that theater, he did our work for us. And in fact, at that particular surgery on that one patient, we had a brain surgeon present and a cardiovascular surgeon, and of course myself. And but the thing is that when we do these, initially, like I said, we removed them. And at this point, I'm devising testing now in which we're basically interested in ringing the dinner bell, so to speak, and seeing if we can obtain a signature by which this thing may communicate. I suspect that some of these are not communicating, quote unquote, with a sound necessarily or anything like that, but in fact through neurochemistry. And that's why some of these things seem to affect the behavior of some of the people that they're in. At least that's the report of some of the abductees.
Sure. Well, in your case, you've got this whole sort of stash of ones that you've gotten through one means or another. It is fascinating because we do know, I'm not sure what your perspective is on this, and I'd like to hear it, but we do know that some abductions are done in concert with the military, meaning on this planet with the help of ETs that are also seen by the abductees, but they are accompanied by military. And so we call them, as you know, MILABS and so on. So is there any, or have you ever had anyone approach you to talk about maybe the difference between alien implants that come from ETs that are even possibly beneficial versus tracking devices, in essence, that might be put in by the military, working with grays? And some of those grays may be actual entities, or some may be programmable biological, like in essence, little robots.
Well, there's several ways I can approach this. Number one is during that, when I spoke to the 250 surgeons at John Muir Medical, one of the things I said was, if we find any of these are human in origin, if the implants are actually human origin, I said there will be a discernible technology present. And I said, so that's going to make this an extremely easy to define the difference between the two. And to this date, we've not found, quote unquote, any MILAB implant cases. Now, I have talked to people who claim to be one guy had about like 25 implants in his skull, and he told me, oh my God, they did this to me and they did that. And I said, now be careful when you tell me these things. I said, because I teach how to determine whether people are lying or telling the truth at a college level. And I said, I'll go through you like a hot knife through warm butter. So just be sure you're telling me the truth here and don't make up anything or stretch stuff. And, the phenomena can be real without you making it something else. And anyway, he sent me the x-rays and everything, and I swore on a stack of Bibles that this was all the military did it to me or whoever. And anyway, I'd had them checked by our doctors, and they said this is part of a for sure.
You yourself have an implant. You still have it?
I do not have the implant. It's no longer in my nasal passage. They apparently came back and removed it. Sometimes they do that. Sometimes they're actually expelled due to, and I'll give you an example, your audience, an example here. A lady attended a presentation at a conference where I was having a workshop, and after she went to the workshop, a few months later, her little girl complained of these strange little men that came in her room, and they put something in her nose. And she said, well, I was stunned, and she said, so I did what you said in that workshop and had her sneeze into a Kleenex, and to my amazement, there were 4 little tiny gold spheres about the size of a dull pinhead. And anyway, she lost the first 4. They were so small they fell out of her Kleenex into the carpet, and she lost them. About 2 or 3 weeks later, the entities came back and put 4 more in the little girl's nose, and I got those. I do have them now. And they were studied at York University under the care of Dr. Nick Malakis, under a metallurgist, a tenured professor there. And he says these objects are 51% silver, 49% gold. And he said about the size of a dull pinhead. He said I tried to replicate them. And as a metallurgist, I should be able to easily do that. He said I was not able to replicate them when the surface, they look like a little moon is what they look like. They're little tiny craters all over them. And he said, I'm puzzled. He said that I can't replicate that. And then privately, he asked me a question. He said, what do you think these are for? And I laughed and I said, I suspect that there was I said, for lack of a better term, medication on the outside that the little crater part of it would hold. And once that had been used up, I said, they're so small, they probably would be ejected simply because from sneezing or whatever. And I said, I suspect that's what the purpose of them was. And he said, that is just fascinating. So our next interest is to do a 2 test on the little gold spheres, and that is to determine if the metals of gold and silver are in fact extraterrestrial in origin. And we can do that, and there's a certain test that we can do that will tell us whether it is or whether it isn't. Okay,
but you haven't done the test yet?
No, everybody always says that. You know, I've got some DNA tests I'd like to do too. Right now, they're only $14,000 a test. There's about a half a dozen
right
per object, and I figured, $300,000, pretty well wrap that up. So if anybody out there has got, a couple of $300,000 or $400,000 they want to donate to this, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I do this stuff myself out of my own pocket. I don't beg for money and or go to people and try to get them to buy into whatever we're doing. I pay for this out of my pocket, and I do it as I can, and so that's just the way it is. So I do it as I can afford to get it done, because I actually have probably close to 20 implants currently, and then of course the fluorescence, probably a dozen samples of fluorescence. And again, the fluorescence samples, one professor said you're going to need about $14,000 per one. So
yeah, that's amazing.
It's not cheap.
That's amazing that you have been doing this for so long, and you are not able to raise the necessary money to be able to analyze these bits. I find that shocking. I actually have to say that, I'm on camera right now, and actually I have an implant right here on my arm. I've had it actually since I was a little kid, and I have a memory of being abducted, and I thought I was shot by
people. And I'll cap that by saying, last of all, I just got back from India, where we did our first implant surgery in India, removing an object from a lady, an Indian lady.
That's excellent. Let me just say that I have a whistleblower who told me just recently, actually he'd mentioned it before, but he told me again, that anyone who's left the planet and gone, says they're working on Mars or they've been to the moon or whatever, has a something about them that is discernible, that is different, that people who are, I guess, in the know, meaning in the secret space program, can actually tell if they're telling the truth or not. And this is kind of similar, this fluorescence that you're talking about. In other words, this would be an abductee. The other thing is that removing implants is excellent because you also get a piece of evidence, right?
That's true. One of the things that we're interested in looking for initially when we removed implants back in 1990, it was actually late 80s, but the first public surgeries that I allowed to be viewed and for people to be present was in 1995. after I spoke to 250 surgeons at John Muir Medical Hospital on the alien implant phenomena, in which I made some predictions. I made several predictions about what the implants would be like when we really found them, when we opened them up, looked at them, and so on. And the predictions were, to say the very least, not real exciting to the I in effect told them that if we found these objects inside these people, what we were going to find, in fact, was that these objects were, if they were alien, would leave no, there would literally be no technology inside them. And of course, everybody was sitting there like stunned, you know. And then I said, the second thing we're going to find is that the biology surrounding the objects will be very different, and to the point that it will be not natural to that part of the body. And they really winced at that. And I said, on the top of all of that, I said, the biology surrounding the implants, if in fact when we find them and open them, the biology will show a non-inflammatory response. That in effect it will be concealing the implant, so the body will not recognize that there's something, a foreign object there. Needless to say, everybody was like, oh, okay. And within a year, we did the first public surgeries, and to everybody's shock and amazement, especially the pathologist, he said there is a non-inflammatory response around the cocoon surrounding the implant, the biological cocoon that covered or housed these implants. He said it's a non-inflammatory response. He said that's impossible because that's a keratinous material, and he said keratin only shows up in hair, fingernails, anything outside the body, skin, and so on. He said this is deep inside the body. That's impossible. It can't be. And so we've had quite a bit of interest generated there, and one Nobel laureate simply said, if you can replicate that process, Mr. Sims, outside in a lab, away from this phenomena, so to speak, in a lab, independent of that, he said, you may already have a Nobel laureate find. He said, because organ donor rejection is going to be non-existent if you can replicate that. And I said, well, I appreciate your candor and your goodwill. I said, what lab do you suppose I could send that to and actually trust? And he smiled and said, none.
Exactly.